All right, hello, and welcome back to the Chase Notes podcast as we continue on our Wednesday afternoon edition here on the program. Justin Rowan of the Chase Down, way back in the day, an OG at Fear of the Sword. We have been on NBA Twitter for way too long, Justin, where I'm going to guess we're both in our 30s at this point, and things have changed, but some things have not, which is that we still talk basketball an unhealthy amount. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. Still talking about basketball way too much, but you know what? It's getting more fun by the day, and it's certainly a lot more fun now that the Cavs have added Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, and we'll get into that. But your show, Chase Down, it's done. I mean, we've talked about how we're gonna go through with the whole naming rights issue between my name, the Chase Down, that sort of thing. Using my likeness with college football and college sports, just adopting that NIL, name, image, and likeness, and how much that's going here in Knoxville, Tennessee. We're continuing to negotiate on that front, but it makes me happy to see the Chase Down being such a success and the name working out in Cleveland.
Yeah, it's a little concerning. I was kind of banking on a lot of the sales of the Sexland t-shirts to help fight that lawsuit. But now that revenue is out the window. So I got to pivot. I got to figure out a way to make this work because it definitely is a little concerning now.
Absolutely. Well, we have some Cav stuff. I don't know if you heard about this. Did you see this? That the Cleveland Cavaliers last week, they traded for Donovan Mitchell, if I have that right, Justin. Now that you've had close to a week, I want to get your perspective on this because you've had several days now to kind of think about who was moved, who went where, what picks went out the door, how this is going to work, thinking about just what this new foursome of Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, Donovan Mitchell, and Darius Garland are going to look like when they're actually playing basketball with one another. Now that you've had those days to kind of think about this more, where have you landed and what has changed since your immediate reaction?
Yeah, I think as I've kind of digested it, I understand it more. Like I think it's impossible to not pick nits when you are dealing with a situation where you're moving all of kind of your future picks that are available to you at that moment. And I think obviously the Cavs would love to have a big wing. A big playmaking wing is kind of like the key to success in the NBA, but you don't really have control over the players that are available to you. And the Cavs are in a unique situation where they have this great young core, these three guys that worked so well together last year, and they did so with some of the worst spacing in the league. You look at Basketball Index, their lineup spacing data, and Darius Garland had an F in terms of lineup spacing around him. I think it was like in the 10th percentile, 9th percentile. So it was rough, but it still worked incredibly well. So when you add someone that is a dynamic scorer, someone that takes threes at such a high volume, that's a talented playmaker and can play on and off ball just like Garland can, I think it makes you feel really good about the fit of this core together. And the fact that both of the bigs are kind of guys that are unselfish, that do all the little things and just are kind of focused on winning. It makes you feel good that you have these four young players that fit so well together, both on court as well as from a personality standpoint. It seems like this is a good bet to make.
Interesting. I'm curious from your perspective, and we'll get into who benefits the most and least here, but with the trade and Laurie going out the door, Colin Sexton going out the door, and him having to agree to the sign and trade and him moving on to Utah, are you at all concerned that you didn't get like a Bogdanovich in this one, where you're like, that would have been nice, where just to feel better, another option, you talked about the spacing here, because he's kind of like the last man standing in Utah from that contender team, and we'll see if he ends up in a Russell Westbrook deal or whoever, if LA and Utah can figure something out. Like, we'll see. Still many days, like what, 18 or so days until training camp, something like that. I'm curious, do you Are you surprised that Kobe Altman did not bring in or just be like, "Hey, we need somebody else along with Mitchell because we're sacrificing a lot of depth, and this is now a weak point where a lot is on Isaac Okoro to make that leap, or Chetty Osman to make that leap." And I don't know, like it would have been nice, I guess, if Royce O'Neal had not already been traded to Brooklyn a while back. Like he would have made a lot of sense on this Cleveland team. Is there a part of you that wishes that there was another person involved in this deal to kind of fill out the rest of that starting four?
I mean, I would absolutely love to have a more traditional wing.
Mm,
I think this is a real opportunity for Isaac Okoro to kind of step up and build off of what he did last season. After December, he was shooting 50% from the floor, 39% from three. And while that was on low volume and he wasn't really defended much, it's going to be a lot of open looks again for him next season. And if that offseason work uh, pays off and he's able to even turn that volume up from 2 3-point attempts a night to four, I think
mm,
that really kind of changes the calculus on this. And the other thing to consider as well is Larry Markkinen. It's no secret, like he misses time, and
mm,
when he missed time last year, Dean Wade stepped in. He stepped in for almost 30 starts last year. And in those minutes with Garland, Mobley, and Allen on the court with Dean Wade, the Cavs had a plus 19 net rating.
mm,
They were great on both ends of the court, and I think there's definitely a bet that hey, we still have the internal depth. We have guys like Isaac Okoro, Dean Wade, Lamar Stevens, Jeddah Osman, and even maybe Dylan Windler.
hmm,
Now that he's coming off his first healthy off season and full off season, maybe one of these guys are going to step up. But the other part of this equation is the Cavs have a lot of cap space
mm,
next summer as a result of this move, and there are going to be names like Bogdanovich, like Harrison Barnes, Andrew Wiggins, Jeremy Grant, Kyle Kuzma, Gary Trent Jr. that are probably going to be on the unrestricted free agent market. And if the internal bet doesn't pay off, there's going to be options to pivot. And yes, I would love to have Bogdanovich in that deal. But when you look at a salary matching standpoint, you'd be moving on from Caris LeVert, who I think is
mm,
going to have real value in that six-man role and
mm,
giving them another playmaking ball handler, or Kevin Love, who obviously now has a more kind of solidified role alongside Jared Allen and Evan Mobley as that third big off of the bench, veteran presence. And I wouldn't feel comfortable moving off of either of those guys. And
mm.
I think taking the patient approach and seeing if that internal development answers that issue can kind of inform you on whether or not you want to go out and spend that cap space in that area or if there's another need that needs to be addressed. So the nice thing about this Mitchell trade is he's got term on his contract. The rest of the core is locked up, and they can still take a bit of a patient approach when it comes to the development of the other players.
Who benefits the most from this trade? This could be coaching staff, front office, player who will be playing next to Mitchell. Who do you think benefits the most from Mitchell in Cleveland?
I'm going to go with Evan Mobley.
Hmm.
And I want to give credit. I forget who was in our Chase Down Discord, but
Mm,
they made a really smart point about how the acquisition of Donovan Mitchell means that Evan Mobley doesn't necessarily have to be Minnesota KG, where he's being counted on to be a lead offensive option, and can be more Boston Kevin Garnett,
hmm,
where he's doing all kind of the right things. He's able to play winning basketball. There's a lot of talent around him. He can just kind of stay in his comfort zone. And I'm still expecting him to continue to develop his offensive game and to become a serious part of this team. But you can probably now get away with Evan Mobley being like a 20 to 22 points per game guy in the future, where you just have so much talent around them. You have the playmaking of both Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, and having both of those guys is going to make things a lot easier for both he and Jared Allen. So I think this really helps Evan Mobley not get into a situation where he's being asked to do too much too soon,
mm,
and can kind of develop in a more natural team orientated way, which seems to be the way that he likes to play anyways. Like this guy's a winner at every level of basketball and has excelled with a lot of talent around him, whether it's with Team USA or other situations. So I think that this is a really, really nice move and complements Evan Mobley's skill set well.
Who, on the flip side, stands to benefit the least from Mitchell arriving in Cleveland?
I think probably Caris LeVert. Like he was
Mm,
lined up to be starting in a contract year, and I still think that there's the opportunity for this to work out well for him. Like I think
mm,
the last couple of years, Caris LeVert has been asked to do too much on the basketball court. Like he's basically, hey, you're succeeding Victor Oladipo in Indiana. We need you to be the
mm.
lead option. Or Brooklyn with all the injuries, we need you to do too much. I think there's an opportunity for this to really work out for LeVert and for him to kind of be another ball handler off the bench. If you're staggering Garland and Mitchell, he can allow you to maybe get those guys some off ball looks even when the other one isn't on the court. So there's an advantage to that. But obviously, as you're heading into a contract year and you go from starter to likely coming off the bench, at least
Mm.
that would be my guess. There is a impact from that, and there's a fallout from that. So I would probably pick LeVert, but for the most part, there's not really a massive change in terms of like what minutes are available throughout the roster because Ochai Agbaji wasn't playing last year. Colin Sexton wasn't playing after the 11th game. So really you're swapping Lowry Markkinen for Donovan Mitchell.
Hmm.
And I think that should give Cavs fans a high degree of confidence that, hey, this can work out. We haven't given up a ton of our depth. Despite swapping Lowry from Mitchell, we still have brought back Ricky Rubio. We brought in Howell Neto. We have Robin Lopez, so we actually have a legitimate backup center that works here. And you've got these other guys that stepped up, like Dean Wade and Lamar Stevens, and had to start games last year, and the team didn't fall apart as a result of that. So I think that there is still a good amount of depth on this team, and that's encouraging.
When you look at the East now, very, very top heavy side of the conference. I mean, my Hawks, I have no idea. Like you could tell me 4 seed, you could tell me 9 seed, and neither would surprise me going into this year. But now the Cavs, I don't know. Like where are you feeling like is because the pressure is now on, right? Like Kobe Altman, the pressure is now on. You brought in the picks are gone. Like Colin Sexton's gone. The questions like this is it. This is the team. And like you said, they'll have some space next summer to figure out the 3 spot if it doesn't go it goes awry with the internal options. But when you look at the rest of the East and how it's set up right now, where do the Cavs realistically and fairly fall in line with what they have going into next year?
Um, I think right now the top tier in the East is probably Boston, Milwaukee. I think that those two are kind of comfortably my 1 and 2 in whatever order.
Mm,
Tier two, you're probably looking at Philly, Miami, and I think I put Cleveland in there now. Like I think
mm,
Cleveland is now closer to those teams than they are kind of the other group, which I would include Toronto, Atlanta, and Chicago as that third tier.
mm,
Brooklyn is probably somewhere either in tier 2 or 3. I think it's worth noting at this point, like if Kevin Durant misses 20 games, that's one of his healthiest seasons in like the last 4 or 5 years, right? Like
mhm,
those guys are going to miss some time. It's going to take some time to gel. You're counting on major rotation players, whether it's Joe Harris, TJ Warren, Ben Simmons that didn't play last season. So that is going to take some adjustment time. So I don't have as much confidence in them surging up the standings in the regular season. Although
mm.
I think they're going to be a dangerous team in the playoffs if they stay together. So right now, I'd probably have the Cavs in that kind of tier 2, and I think for them, they really need to prioritize the regular season because they don't have the playoff experience of these other teams. And Miami, Milwaukee, even Philadelphia to some extent, they're going to be playing the long game because Miami knows if we rest and we kind of prioritize getting guys healthy for the start of the playoffs, doesn't matter if we don't have home court because we probably have the best coach in basketball and we can steal home court in game 1 of a playoff series and then we'll be fine, right? So from a Cavs standpoint, they really need to prioritize the regular season, not drop those games, and hopefully draw a more favorable first round matchup against a team like Toronto, Atlanta, or Chicago, which I mean that's still a really, really tough series because those are all really good teams. Like good teams are going to miss the playoffs because the league is just so deep right now.
Trey and DeJounte versus Darius and Donovan in a first round series after what we saw this past year, I think would be
I would love that. I'd
must
love
see
that.
television. I don't think it would go well. Get pretty chippy. I think there'd be a lot of back and forth, but
There was already some bad blood like 2 years ago between
yeah.
these teams. Like they don't like playing each other, and I really like Atlanta's
Mhm.
core, and I'm a big DeJounte Murray fan. I think the fit of Trey and DeJounte is not as natural, but I
Mm.
think it can work out, and it's just gonna be how much of a learning curve is there for Trey to occasionally play off ball, but I think DeJounte, I know people bring up the shooting, but he's so smart as a cutter and an off ball player that I think that's just going to work. I think like Cleveland with Garland and Mitchell, Trey and DeJounte are going to stagger, so one of them's on the court at all times. That's going to be a really, really great series. And honestly, if I'm rooting for one, I'm hoping for that series. Even if it doesn't go the Cavs' way, I think that is the start of a really good rivalry, especially considering those teams have kind of a shared playoff history in recent years.
The thing about the staggering stuff, we all say that, like, that's something that all of us, I mean, the Atlanta sports guys here on the show, like, we're gonna document game one because Nate McMillan is not known for staggering and he loves his all bench lineups. And I don't know. I don't know if Nate's the guy to maximize DeJounte and Trey in this group. But we'll see. We shall see. And I also just think it's going to go one of two ways, right? Like in Atlanta, where either this goes really well and they are two all NBA guards who mesh perfectly. Trey's happy, giving up some of his usage. He respects him and he realizes, hey, we're a top 4 seed in the East. He brought us back to where I want to stay. That's great. Or it goes really bad and Trey hates playing off ball and Trey does not like sharing the spotlight, because it's one thing to say it in the offseason in the summer. It's another thing to be in game 45 and to be really annoyed at how much you're having to play off the ball and you're trying to get paid and trying to be an all NBA player. And this is cutting into that. Those are two very different things. So I think either this ends swimmingly and the Hawks are contenders, or Trey and DeJounte are both not in Hawks uniforms in 2 years or less. I don't think there's a middle ground here. Once you go all in and you're now in the big game, Justin, once you make these kind of moves, we just see around the league now, it all blows up. Like there's no, it's just boom or bust. And once you play that game, that's why teams like Memphis and New Orleans and others, I think, are just so terrified of dipping their toes in 100%. Because once you dive in the deep end, that's it. Like it's not like you're going to be able to, all right, it didn't work out. We'll move that guy who messed things up and then we'll keep going. And no, everything's over at that point. You have to start from scratch and it's tough.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's why I have a little more confidence when you look at the Cavs situation with Garland, Mobley, and Allen all
Mm,
locked up for long term. Like if the next 2 years don't work out with Mitchell, like worst case scenario, you could shop Donovan Mitchell in his prime and maybe
mm,
kind of make an adjustment on the fly. Whereas with the Hawks, it's a little bit different because there's Trey and DeJounte, and then all right, does Okongwu step up and be the player that I think he can be? I'm a huge Okongwu fan. I think he's going to take over that job from Clint Capella in the not too distant future. So maybe that's a possibility. Does Hunter stay healthy? I think Hunter's a hell of a player, but those are more of an unknown versus the Cavs situation where
mm,
we're going from who's going to be that fourth player to all of a sudden our fourth best player going into next year is going to be one of Evan Mobley or Jared Allen. That's a
mm.
really good position to be in, and there's a little bit more term on that Mitchell contract versus DeJounte, who's an unrestricted free agent in 2 years. So I get it from Atlanta's perspective, and I think that they've done a lot of really smart moves. I think that they're in a position if they need to still kind of make some adjustments. Like I think you could probably move Clint Capella for some value if kind of that internal growth comes along. Griffin is obviously kind of a X factor as well. If he lives up to who he can be and stays healthy, they could really, really benefit from his presence on their roster. So there's just a few more unknowns when it comes to Atlanta, but absolutely, when you make these types of trades, it's not a no risk situation. And I think the Cavs gave up a lot in this deal, and there is a risk associated with that.
But it's fun. It's a fun time. Like I just feel like if you're a Cavs fan, man, eat this up, man. I mean, it's hard to get out of the gutter. It's hard to rebuild and do what the Cavs did. Like it's kind of cool that they've gotten to experience now two different ways of contention, right? Where you build from within, you do things the right way, you hire the right coach, you take your time, you bring in the right vets and like Ricky Rubio and company. And then, hey, Mitchell comes open and you've been diligent, and then you're like, all right, we're going to go all in. But these are all guys that you brought in. You drafted and developed Darius Garland. You drafted and developed Evan Mobley. You made a smart trade on Jared Allen when you saw value there. Like, okay, we can do this. Let's go get Jared Allen. And it's cool. And then there's the alternative. It's like, oh, LeBron's from Cleveland, so he's just going to be like that. That's another way of building, of just this guy wants to go play. The best player in the world, turns out he wants to go play in his hometown. That's
I
another way
wonder
of.
if he regrets that extension now that the Cavs have these 4 and cap space next summer. I mean, it would be a pay cut for him, but that would be a pretty seamless fit to have
Well, you said you have cap
Garland.
space next summer, so it's I don't know. He can't be moved this year, but I don't know what is. Can he opt out next summer? I don't.
No, because he signed that
So
2-year
that
extension, the 1 plus
remove
1.
that. So he cannot opt out till the following summer.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's oof. But also just my gut tells me on the LeBron thing, and then one final Cavs question for you, Justin. It's just that like I think he knows deep down, like LeBron's too smart. He knows this Lakers roster. He remembers the end of the Miami Heat rosters. He remembers the end of these kind of things. He's looking out, and I think he understands that Anthony Davis cannot play 120 consecutive basketball games or somewhere close very often. And he got the championship with him in the bubble. He's kind of stuck with Westbrook. I think LeBron knows he's played his last important NBA game. I think it's just more of like he wants to get to Bronny and move on in the next chapter, own an NBA team, whatever. I think, and this is something I said last year before the playoffs when I was like, Lakers are missing the playoffs, and I don't think folks are ready for this, but LeBron's already played his last important NBA game. Like those are gone. Like barring some just like Buddy Hield and Miles Turner are not flipping the Lakers to contention in the West. It's just not there, and I don't see the path with the age and what he needs out of Anthony Davis for a full season from October to June. I just don't think he can do it because you got to be a top 4 seed. You look at it year over year, you've got to win enough regular season games to get home court advantage at least for one round, and I just don't see a path. So I think it's over. I'm gonna enjoy it. It's LeBron James, but I think it's over. Is that a Quake take, Justin?
It's a bit of a take. I think it's a little tricky because they're going to have a max cap slot next summer in all likelihood. I hate the idea of them punting a year. But I think in all likelihood, like if LeBron is playing other meaningful games, it's not going to be as the guy anymore, right? Like if he joins the Cavs in 2 years and signs like the mid-level exception or whatever, because he's just going to go ring chasing, he's probably going to be like maybe the 3rd best player on the team. Like,
Yeah.
And that's crazy to say, but we're almost at the point where like he's maybe a fringe top 5 small forward when you look at Kevin Durant, Giannis, Jason Tatum, and some of these other guys that have kind of narrowed the gap. And it's amazing that he's hung on as long as he has, but it's the math that has certainly changed on LeBron.
Yeah, I think the only way is James Jones bringing in his friend and just doing a DeAndre Ayton for LeBron James trade. Like that is something that I've always pit.
Yeah.
Like just that would be best for both sides. I don't know if it can happen, and then LeBron eventually just buying the Suns from Sarver is would just be a great thing, and then he and James Jones just run the Suns together. I don't know. That's my long-term conspiracy theory on how things go with LeBron. Last thing. So when you look at the schematic stuff, Justin, you think about how these guys are all going to play together. What excites you most? What should Cavs fans be most excited about? What Donovan Mitchell, with what you've seen from JB Bickerstaff and what kind of stuff he runs, what is going to be the coolest part of Mitchell being integrated into their offense and their half-court offense especially?
Man, I just think it's what both he and Garland could do on and off ball. Like both of them are such high level playmakers, and both of them are so skilled running the pick and roll, and they have 2 really good pick and roll bigs. Like I said, the fact that Mobley and Allen worked so well together in year 1 is really encouraging because that was supposed to be a year where, hey, maybe the offense doesn't work, but at least they're good on defense. That wasn't the case. The offense worked really well. Like those guys with the double drag, their intelligence off ball. There was a lot of things that they can do. And to me, it's really exciting that you look at it last year and the way when they were healthy, they played was Jared Allen starts at center. Mobley checks out, and he's the backup center. So you have 48 minutes of elite rim protection and elite defense. Those guys are going to get better. And now on the offensive end, you are going to now have that same situation where there's 48 minutes of one of Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell on the court offensively. And those are guys that can lift entire lineups up. And if you just get a couple guys to hit, whether it's Caris LeVert stepping up, whether it's Isaac Okoro, Dean Wade, Dylan Windler, and obviously Kevin Love, like you can have sustained really high level play on both ends of the court. And I think that that's a really, really exciting place to be. And one final thought as well is when we talk about Cavs going from where they're at now to contending, I
Mm.
think the only really thing that they need is for Evan Mobley to hit his potential. Because if you have 3 all-stars and none of them are your best prospect, and all of a sudden that fourth guy becomes the best player on this team, even if he's not the leading scorer, is the most impactful best player on this team, that's probably enough to get you into the contending mix. So if Evan Mobley reaches his potential and Garland and Mitchell are your second and third best player in some order, that's a really, really good roster. So I think there's a lot of reasons to be excited as a Cavs fan.
We'll end on this, Justin. September 7th, it's your opportunity to be clairvoyant. Justin Rowan of the Chase Down Pod. What does this season end like for Cleveland?
Second round.
Okay.
Second round team put up a good fight, maybe a 6-game series in the second round. I would be really happy with that as an outcome, whether that's as a 3 or 4 seed. I'm going to predict right now. I'm going to put on my prophecy goggles and say that they're going to get home court. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. They were half game out of the 1 seed at the All-Star break last year, and then they just didn't get to play together after that.
So who falls out though in this scenario?
I think Miami. Is the team that to me stands out.
Yeah.
I know they were the 1 seed last year, but there was about 2 games separating like 1 through 5. I think they got a little bit worse on the court. They're a little bit older and they didn't really do anything to replace the guys that left. So I'm going to say Miami because I also just don't think that they're going to prioritize the regular season in the same way as some of these other teams.
That's interesting. I think someone's gonna fall out. Like the Heat, we just keep waiting on because I mean, since the bubble on, just the march and the mileage that all these guys have on them, it's just you're waiting for the bottom to fall out at some point for this group, and I think that's why they continue to explore bigger deals. Is they're like we're playing with fool's money. Like we didn't expect to be in the finals in 2020. We didn't expect to just get this much out of this group, but I don't know. Miami's the big wild card there too, and
and obviously Philly because of health.
Yeah, Philly if they're healthy.
If Embiid misses time, that just takes them out of the running, right? So
yeah.
I think I'd take Garland and Mitchell over Maxey and Harden at this point.
Yeah,
that might be a hot take. I don't know, but I'm taking.
I think that's fair. I'm here for it. Justin, what can the good folks check out from you over at the Chase Down this week?
Yeah, absolutely. We got Tony Jones coming on the podcast Thursday, September 8th. So really excited to talk to him and kind of get more of that Utah perspective of both how this trade went down and what Donovan Mitchell presently does and what the Cavs situation would do for his playing career moving forward. So really excited to talk to Tony, and you can find that wherever you got this podcast.
I like it. Tony's good people, and that'll be fun. I also love my conspiracy theory on this, Justin, is that they had that uniform leak, right? That they're really bad. These uniforms are really, really bad, and just the highlighter green, the black, like watching Jazz games this year, whenever they play, like come into your city, you're gonna be like, who is that? And you're gonna have to do a double take.
I feel so bad for Colin Sexton. Like yet another coach and yet another tough jersey for him to wear. Right as the Cavs rebrand launches, he goes to a team with just the worst jerseys I've ever seen.
But they get to dump them once the rebuild ends. So I think these uniforms will only be synonymous with this horrible time in Utah basketball where they're atrocious. And then when they flip it, because they were kind of locked into this, and they had to do this for a little bit. Once this ends, I think we're going to get, because I think it's like 3 years is when they can get rid of these uniforms and bring in something else. That's when they move. So I think it's just going to be this nice synonymous thing where you're going to hate the uniforms, hate watching this team, and we'll see you on the other side, Utah in 2020. 25. Until then, you're off my league pass list. Justin, Rowan, thank you so much for the time. I greatly appreciate it, and we'll have to check back in again soon.
Yeah, we'll check in soon, and I wish you no luck in that lawsuit over the podcast names.
I appreciate that.